how do you balance sort of competing demands for solutions, attention, etc., across your business? I have to imagine that every once in a while you end up in a place where they might be different stakeholders don't agree. It might be sort of, patient and staff tension. Like, how do you think about Gotcare's role in bringing people together, and how, as a business, do you manage the complexity of all of these different stakeholders?
Yeah, I think
a nice, easy question for you.
I'm gonna answer what comes to mind, and then you let me know if it answers your question. I think the challenge with a lot of this type of work is that if you're not really grounded in what it is that you're doing, you are going to spin very, very fast based on all the needs of everyone else.
Yeah.
And so when people are spinning because they are confused or they are feeling what's the right word? They're feeling defensive, or any of these other hesitant, right? I think it's as change makers, we can very easily follow that spin. So we join them in their spin. we try to troubleshoot for it right away. And really what I've learned is you actually want to do the opposite. You want to spin things the opposite direction. And you do it by actually slowing down and bringing people back into what is the mission of what we're trying to do here? What is the change that we're actually actively trying to do, instead of chasing this urgency that can build when you're following these various different diverse demands. It's almost like the opposite. You're just pulling it back.
I love. Okay, so look, here's why I love this answer. I don't even remember what I asked you, but what I love about this answer is, you could call this a million different things. Focus on the North Star, simplify, whatever. Your point is a little bit of pause and breathe and give yourself the space to remember what matters, the mission, et cetera. And I think that's actually, for anyone in innovation, a remarkably good piece of advice, whether you're building a company, whether you are trying to implement change at your multinational, money hungry enterprise. Mm-hmm. That's a really good way to dodge around confusion. So that's great. Well, let's talk a little bit more about your story. I want to know how you got into this. You have a really interesting background that sort of led you to Gotcare. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you were doing before, but also just how did you end up doing Gotcare?
Yeah. So I went to school for design thinking, which is all about empathizing with the people that you're serving, co-creating solutions, prototyping solutions, right? So more on the process side of things. And I was running a design thinking consultancy for just shy of a decade, working with various different customers, but a good chunk of them in healthcare. And running consultancy was great, but it was for me, it came down to, do I want to track hours as the main metric in my life?
Yep.
Really? And the answer was no. So I promptly started to get out of that business. But one of the last projects that I worked on for about 1.5 years was actually with a private consortium of some of Canada's largest home health providers. And essentially, our team was kind of tasked as the innovation team to try to find a new business model, essentially, for this consortium. And we did. We hosted tons of workshops and sessions and interviews and everything, across the province. And we came up with a really cool thing. Except that cool thing could not be adopted by the consortium. It couldn't even be adopted by any singular member of the consortium, let alone the consortium as a whole. It was like it was like we were so caught up by the coolness of this thing, and the fact that there was a consortium to start with, and they were all pooling in money together to like try to do this thing together.
Yep.
At the end of the day, it was status. The weight of status quo was just so heavy. So really, the what we were talking about with these consortium members was really about spinning up a new team internally to even service this new business model, and they just couldn't justify that. So effectively, got permission to bring what we were doing outside of that ecosystem, and evolve it a bit more. And that, yeah, that was V1 of Gotcare.
Boom. Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense. That's an
Yeah.
accidental corporate venture lab right there. Like, it is,
Yeah.
figured it out, realized you couldn't do it in the mothership, spun it out.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, and
actually some of those executives that we were working with ended up being angel investors. So,
which is, so I'm gonna modify that. That's a accidental and effective corporate venture lab, because like that's what you want. But also, I actually think, I'm glad you shared that, because I think that actually points to something really important. Like, you had conviction and belief from with those people, if they're willing to put their capital right into this new venture. It just, they couldn't, the weight of the status quo was just too heavy, in your words, right? They couldn't move past it. But it gave you a launch pad as an entrepreneur to do something really cool. Is kind of how I interpreted that. And
yeah.
I think that's such a great story. And it's not the first conversation we've had on this podcast about that sort of deliberate but serendipitous, spin out from an organization that couldn't make change itself, or from a group of people that couldn't make change itself. And I love that as a model for innovation. How do you feel about, sort of the progress that you've made versus what you think might have happened if that group and that consortium had said, yes, we're going to do this? I'm asking you to kind of like guess about history and alternate realities here, but you're an entrepreneur. You can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just it's the difference between iterative change and transformative change, right? Like, when you're iterating within a container, your the way you get things done is a little bit different. It's about making small changes, building the story, continuing that narrative, convincing more people, then, expanding the scope of that story, getting more success. And it's just this more gradual process, right? That's like often how corporate innovation feels.
Absolutely.
Whereas when you're in a venture, you're like, are we going to survive? Like, are we going to when do we have to get a job? It's like, the stakes are extremely different. So when the stakes are different, and the way that you move through things are different, right? Like, it's like, how can I fundamentally create this such a unique value proposition that that others can't help but want to try, which is like a very different thing than the arc of corporate innovation. Not to say one is better than the other at all, because with in the standard corporate information track, what the beauty of it is, scale is inherent within the ecosystem, right? So you like do this quote unquote small thing, but you can impact potentially millions of people right away. You have a venture, you do this like really deep work, right? That really changes the situation for a smaller cohort of people. And so the question becomes, well, what do you value? Do you value deep change for a smaller cohort where you grow that cohort over time, or do you value small change for a large cohort and you try to increase that over time? So